Hello and welcome to the Choralosophy podcast. This is Chris Muntz and this is episode 85, Exploring the Choirs of Europe with James Whitbourn of St. Edmund Hall at Oxford University. On the next stop, with Betsy Cook-Weber, with me here at the Choralosophy podcast, we are in Oxford. Now, of course, Betsy is in Oxford, or at Oxford University at St. Edmund Hall, and we are joined by composer and conductor and teacher James Whitbourn, or as he describes himself, a musician. We discussed the Oxford system of colleges and the wide range of choral opportunities it provides. I was fascinated by this because I'd never taken the time to wrap my head around the fact that choral music at Oxford, air quotes, does not mean one particular monolithic thing. The diversity of approaches, philosophies, and reasons for being for a choral group at Oxford is remarkably diverse, providing students of many interests and skill levels an opportunity to make singing a part of their student experience. In addition to being a composer, well known to American choral audiences for the Grammy-nominated Williamson Voices recording of his Annelies, as well as many other fine works, James is the director of choirs at one of those many Oxford choral programs. So join us as we dig into his world and discuss their model for auditions, his philosophy on what it means to be a well-rounded musician, the value of the live, unplugged choral art form, and much more. I hope you'll enjoy this conversation. ChoralosophyCon 2022. We are back on for a second year in a row for a fantastic convention. We limit these conventions to 40 to 45 because we want them intimate. We want people feeling like they can talk and express and ask questions and really dig into the content that we deliver at this professional development conference. It's going to be Kansas City, June 13th through 15th. So make sure you head over to the Facebook page, ChoralosophyCon 2022. Join the Facebook page, and you're not going to miss the announcements when the signups start, which is going to be very soon. Okay, and then last announcement, make sure you're using that promo code at Sight Reading Factory, at mymusicfolders.com, mychoirrobes.com. If you need sheet music, ryanmain.com. Fantastic stuff there, and also at graphitepublishing.com. So head over there, use Choralosophy every time you check out for a discount. Okay, everybody, I'm here with Betsy Cook-Weber again, and this time we have another friend, and his name is James Whitbourn. James, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Start out, James, if you will, and just introduce yourself. Who are you and what do you do? And let's just start there.
I'm James Whitbourn. I'm a composer and I'm also the director of music at St. Edmund Hall in Oxford.
Okay, so tell us more about what is St. Edmund Hall? Explain it to someone who's a novice and doesn't understand what that is.
Yeah. The University of Oxford is a complex organisation that comprises many collegiate organisations. So each college has its own life and breadth to it, and it also has its own site and buildings. And in the colleges, the undergraduates who are reading for a variety of subjects receive their tuition, but they're examined on a university-wide level. So if you like, all the college tutors are on their side, as it were, because they want them to do the best they possibly can, and they're examined centrally within the university. So the university consists of these 45 colleges, each autonomous, with its own life and, in many cases, choral setup. As well as many other things, and then the faculties and departments as well, and it all makes up the university. So St. Edmund Hall is one of those. It was founded somewhere, we think, in the 14th century. The first reference to it is in 1317, so it will have been sometime before that. St. Edmund himself taught here, and it now bears his name. It's usually known as Teddy Hall, actually, informally.
Wow. Okay. So it sounds like it's kind of like a Harry Potter house. Everyone's sorted into their own.
It's yes, except that we did actually predate Harry Potter by some.
I see.
Some
I see.
way.
Okay. That's really interesting. So I think I think I knew that about how Oxford University is set up. I just don't think I've ever had it explained to me that concretely, which is very helpful. So when Americans think about choir at Oxford, the choral music at Oxford, we're really talking about many different choirs.
Many different choirs, and many different types of choirs as well. Some colleges have huge budgets and centuries old traditions, and some colleges have very modest budgets, and it serves a whole different purpose in each college. Each college has its own life and purpose for running a choral program.
Okay, that's really interesting. And I wonder too, thinking about this in contrast to the university systems that we're familiar with as Americans, I wonder if the best analogy might be, let's say, a large state university system that has multiple campuses. Is that a bad analogy?
I think it's dangerous to draw any analogy really, because the, the the thing is that if an organization is built up over many centuries, you get so many quirky and interesting, sometimes frustrating, but often very wonderful anomalies and distinctive features that they tend to be rather particular to these places. Obviously, there are similarities with other institutions, but it's just the age and the number of times that people have thought over things and overworked or worked over the same things, and things evolve in that way over time.
Gotcha. Okay, that's interesting. So what I'm probably the most fascinated with your story and your setup right now is you mentioned earlier that at Oxford, within the larger university, there are lots of choirs, which is, of course, what we're here to talk about. And there are lots of types of choirs and reasons to have choirs and, philosophies and all that kind of stuff. So how would you describe what your environment is at St. Edmund's Hall for choir, maybe in contrast to others that are around you?
Yeah, I think here at St. Edmund Hall we have a choral program to add a particular layer of beauty into the place, which can be achieved in sound, in this very direct musical way that choral singing gives us all. To come right from the heart, to come right from literally the human body, in that very approachable way and very inclusive way that choral singing allows.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that is just there in college in quite an organic way. And it drops into various moments of college life. We sing Grace now on a Sunday at Hall at dinner, and we're there on various other key college moments. But our ordinary work is to sing choral evensong in chapel each week, and that's one of those services which is found in almost all colleges in Oxford and in Cambridge and in various other universities and collegiate institutions, educational institutions, as well as, of course, as being there in the cathedrals. And there's a wonderful tradition of that, which students like to tap into and be part of.
Uh-huh.
Chris, chatting with James and other Cambridge and Oxford choral conductors, I think they've done a better job than we Americans in terms of coming to terms with what their value is to the institution where they work. And it's different from college to college. And each philosophy is very admirable, but just having that philosophy, I think, has helped engender a really healthy choral scene, as varied and different as it is. I admire what's happening here and in Cambridge a whole lot.
But again, longevity is part of that.
Yes.
Because if you can tap into that's quite different from setting up a modern institution and saying, well, we should have a a choral course within this that you know that does this, that, and the next thing. And people say, why would you do that? And of course there is a sort of rationale of continuity and longevity that comes with places that have just been around for a long time, and that's really helpful, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds, Betsy, to your comment too about, comparing it to the US, it seems to me like what James is describing and some of the other folks that you've been talking to is that the choral ensemble is a little bit more integrated into student life. Well, quite a bit more integrated into student life. And I mean the students maybe who even don't sing in the choir. So if we're in a situation where students are attending evensong, even as to sit in the congregation and to listen, well, that's quite a bit more often than an American college student would ever hear the college choir on their campus,
Right.
unless they choose to come to a concert, which most of them don't. And so that's an interesting way to think of it too, is even if it's not a concert, the choir is visible. The choir is part of the life of the campus, in a lot of ways similar to how a church choir would be very much part of the worship service in a church.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Back in the first episode we did together, I was talking about looking for the secret sauce.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think part of the secret sauce is being integrated in the fabric of the place where you are. And that's something I'm going to work on a lot harder when I get back home.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of doing isolated concerts, to really try to become part of the fabric of the place more.
Yeah.
Which these choirs definitely are.
Right.
What gives me a lot of pleasure is when I feel that the students themselves think that the enterprise is worthwhile, to the degree that they suggest to their friends that they come to something, and just say come to Evensong because it's nice, because you'll enjoy it, because it's nice to be there, and then we'll go to dinner afterwards, and then it's something that then forms part of that student life without people being especially aware of it, or being very sort of consciously going to chapel, as it were. It's just there in the front quad. In fact, if you go into most medieval colleges in Oxford and Cambridge, you'll see that the two central buildings in the main quad, in the front quad, or courtyard, to use the Cambridge term, are the chapel and the dining hall. And this idea that you kind of eat together and pray together is part of the sort of medieval ethic. And although that's not taken literally necessarily, it's there in the structure, if you like, and it's something to build on.
Right. Right. I think in the United States, and probably in any place where there is a school choir, if you kind of expand your view and look at the most successful school choirs, I think you would find that they are the places that integrate into their student body the most. So in the American high school context, where I work throughout the week as my day job, I think about, as often as I can, how do I get one of my choirs in front of the student body, the entire student body, and how many situations can we plug them in so that they become? It's like if the students are getting together for something in our building, the choir needs to be there, because it represents, it's kind of a metaphor for the student body. My largest choir is 100 kids, and they come from every walk of life within the school, and so the student body then reflects that, which I think is so important. And then of course it's good for recruiting, but it's not even about, for me, it's not even about getting everyone to sing in choir. It's about modeling for the rest of the population what it means to be unified and be together, and those types of things. So James, what I wonder too, philosophically, from your perspective, and this is just as Betsy and I collect as many perspectives and philosophies as we can over her travels, how do you think, kind of taking it now into your rehearsals a little bit, like what are the philosophies that drive one of your rehearsals? What are your goals? Tell us a little bit more about your rehearsal life. Patreon.com/Choralosophy is a chance for you to help support this show in a financial way, but also in a moral support way. There is a private community there of people who are fans of the show, but also find that it gives them value, and they want to help make sure that I don't ever have to stop making it. So for as little as $3 a month, they can chip in there, have access to a private podcast feed for behind the scenes stuff. Some of my teaching materials and rubrics that I've talked about over the years on the show are there. There's a variety of reasons to do it, but hopefully you would do it because you recognize that I'm working hard to keep this professional development and conversation and content coming at you, and you want to show your appreciation. There is a Patreon producers level over there as well, and our producers are Vasquez Academy of Music, John Warner, Ulrika Ygrain Munoz Alarcon, Chandler Smith, David Kowalczyk, Kyle Peterson, Michael Herron, Ryan Main, and Stephen Kathy Kakachik. Thanks a lot.
Well, in this particular college, the choral program is something that essentially happens at the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
We in St Edmund Hall, we don't at the moment offer music as an undergraduate subject. So there's an opportunity to study music as a graduate student, but not as an undergraduate study. So that means that all the people who sing in the choir are actually engaged in a different discipline for their studies. So we have people studying medicine and chemistry and fine art, English, modern languages, all sorts of mathematics, all sorts of subjects. But they tend to be very able students, and they're often good at several things, and music is often one of the things that they're good at. Mm-hmm. But it's something which is aside from their graded academic work, if you like, the work that for which they will earn a degree. But nonetheless, it is part of the education that is offered in this place, mm-hmm. and no less really so for not being part of the degree program. And so my students come to choir rehearsal at the weekend for a different type of stimulus, I think. Obviously, it has its own community, and there are the friendships there. But there's also the opportunity to make music in a particular context and in a particular way that many of those students won't ever have again in their life, I suspect. Mm-hmm. It isn't often that you live in a place with a beautiful quadrangle and a dining hall at one end and a chapel at the other end. You're just here for 3 or 4 years of your life, and it's something that you can do in that rather particular way whilst you're here. And so it's partly about the musical program, it's partly about the community, it's partly about the experience that is so particular to that period of their life. And it's really about doing something very well in addition to what they're studying, for their mainstream academic
right
work.
Yeah.
So it has that sort of end and beginning of week feel to it. It's the Saturday Sunday thing that our weeks, our terms start on a Sunday. So Sunday is always the first day of the week in the academic week. So it's the sort of transition into the new week. And it has a sort of lovely feel to it, and just getting a lot of things done. We work at some intensity really to get the most in a very short period of time that we have.
Right. So as I'm continuing to try to picture your choir and use my imagination to put myself in that place, you mentioned their main academic work. In contrast to what you do in the choir, and I very much appreciate that concept of that they are while they're in the choir, they are still learning, and it is a very academic pursuit to sing in a choir and to study choral music, but it's just a different kind of learning. It's there's no desk. They're not attached to a piece of paper in the same way. They're pulling from the paper rather than pouring onto the paper.
And that's exactly one of the things that I think they value about it. The fact that it is a completely analog activity.
Yeah.
It's a time when everybody can put their phones away, and they do actually.
Mm-hmm.
They can stop checking notifications. Nobody can get at us at that. During choral evensong, no one can get to you. You're unattainable at that time, and this is really kind of very unusual.
Yes.
These days. There are always moments that people can find you and text you and communicate with you, but you can't then. And during rehearsals too, it's a time when you can devote your mind to one thing, and time tends, I think, to go very quickly in these circumstances.
Right.
And you're making real sounds that only that group of people can make. It's absolutely unique to whoever is in the room. And on a different day, it'll be a different sound with a different combination of people. It will be a different sound again. And what we try and do is to explore what sounds that group of people can make. It's not just about getting a load of people that can sight read together and just getting through a lot of music. It's really about trying to explore the sounds that are within those people and that combine with the college chapel, that space and the wood panelled environment, and just how it all sets everything off together at that time on that day. And it's not recorded. It's, if you're there, you're there. If you're not, you've missed it. It's an analog thing. And that's really important, I think, to people, and they value that a lot.
Yeah, that idea is profound. Just the uniqueness of the sound of each individual choir. This choir will never be here again. That's pretty profound. Betsy, were you trying to jump in there?
Yeah, I was just going to say another director of another choir said to me, kind of what we are talking about in the States a lot, which is he wants his choir to be a safe space for students. And we're not talking about mass shooter incidents. We're talking about just a place where students can feel emotionally safe. And I think that these choirs, all of them, as different as they are, I think they help students feel as though they're in a community that's safe and loving, in the best possible way.
And you can't sing well if that's not the case.
Right.
There are I don't know if you've either of you ever come across the book. Now I'm going to blank because it's too early in the morning. What's the name of the book? So it's The Inner Voice. I think the name of the book is The Inner Voice. It's the concept of just about the connection between the way you feel emotionally and how it translates into the physiology of how you would sing, and tension and other types of things in your body. That if or even just the hesitancy, if you don't feel safe in the rehearsal, can you fully sing into that space? That's incredibly important. James, how would you weigh into that idea in your environment? What are your ways of approaching building community within your group?
I mean, that's something that I definitely strive for. So it's getting a balance between getting through enough music to be stimulating and interesting and feel that you're progressing and working hard, and not so much repertoire that things become stressful, because choir is never supposed to be a source of stressfulness for our students. It's obviously I want them to take it seriously, and I want them to work at it, and I want them to do well, but to the point that they can do that freely, if you like, and within the capacity of what is possible within the time frame that we have available. So it's a fine balance actually of trying to get the right amount of material to push people forward and to make it interesting for people that have maybe done some of these things before, but also to be accessible for people who are coming to it perhaps for the first time, as some of my students are. Luckily, they learn jolly quickly, which is good news for me. But nonetheless, for some of them, it is an introduction, and I'm always grappling with that balance to try and get the amount and the concentration right, so that it is something that they look forward to each week. Above all, I just want it to be something that they wake up and think, oh, good, it's Saturday. We've got choir in a minute. Or, on Sunday, just look forward to rehearsal and an evensong and dinner, that sequence that comes on a Sunday. I hope that's what happens. I think it is for the most part. That's certainly what I strive towards.
Challenging, but not terrifying.
I suppose so. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it should never be terrifying.
Right.
Of course. Yeah.
Right.
Sometimes
So that's interesting to me. Say a little bit more, James, about the mix in your choir. You mentioning that some of them are beginners. Is that what I'm hearing you saying? Like have never.
Well, beginners in the sense that they've not been exposed to this type of choir before, or to this type of choral music or this repertoire. And I would say that was the majority of the choir who are coming to the repertoire that we're now singing for the first time. And there's something really sort of wonderful and invigorating and fresh about that. Because of course, if you just get in people that have done all this stuff for decades and they know all the repertoire and they've learnt it in different ways and you're sort of having to undo things at the same time as putting things together, that's a different task. So there are people who sing in the choir that have maybe sung in different sorts of music, maybe music theatre or solo song, or just casually singing at school or with friends or something, but not in this type of organised choral ensemble, and certainly not within a liturgical context as we happen to have it here. So in that way, it is new to quite a lot of them, but it's something that they pick up on as being something that's historic and established and
right,
part of what happens in Oxford, and something that they want to be part of.
Yeah. So so that kind of leads me to the next question then, to what comes to my mind then, if they're people typically who have sung in other contexts, so they've in all the contexts you've mentioned there, and then they're coming into this new context, do you audition? How does a person come into the choir?
So we have a some and some audition scheme. There's an intercollegiate choral scholarship scheme which happens annually, so that people can, while they're still at school, high school, they can apply to Oxford as a choral scholar. Now that has nothing to do with whether they get in. So there are those people that are auditioned, but there are also people that just turn up, and they're auditioned in the sense that I start them in the choir and see how it gets on, and I have a listen out, but I don't necessarily in every case have a sort of formal audition system. It's some and some. Some people I listen to, and some I just integrate.
Gotcha. Okay. Would you say that process varies widely across the Oxford colleges?
It does. It varies widely. So there are some colleges like the Ancient Foundations, Magdalen New College, Christchurch, who would only appoint, at least normally, they would only appoint choral scholars who have gone through that system and have auditioned, and who will have got a provisional scholarship offer, provisional upon them, contingent upon them getting an academic offer, of course. We've had some people that have just turned up in the last couple of years, and they're wonderful. They're wonderful people, wonderful singers, and they're just here. So that's a big, nice surprise.
That's really interesting. Very, very cool. I want to switch gears a little bit because I also know that you're a composer. And so Betsy, do you have any observations that you want to add from your current stop before we talk about James's other life?
Just, that the result of the system is essentially that there's a place for everybody who wants to sing.
Mm-hmm.
That's maybe a little bit too generous a description, but they incorporate a large number of singers with various skill levels and talent levels, which of course I love. I think choral music is kind of universal and for everyone. So
I think across the whole collegiate system,
right.
That is true. Within colleges, of course,
right.
the variations
right.
To that, but within the university, in all its collegiate glory, I would say that is absolutely true. Yeah.
But yes, talk about his compositions because he's a hot shot.
Yes. So, in fact, let's start it this way. Since we've been talking about the part of your life that is directing a choir, and we know that you're also a composer, how would you describe to us kind of how those two things interact in your life, and does one of them occupy more time than others? Like, how does that fit into your world?
Well, I think initially I was a singer in choirs, and that I think has informed most of my choral composition, and I would still never let a piece out there that I hadn't sung through every line myself and knew the physicality of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also, when you're directing choirs, you gain a sense of what brings good moments to choral ensembles, and those things that you can tell somehow from the connection you have with people when something special is happening. And I think over a period of time, you pick up the relationship between the musical compositional moments and the moments when something special is happening with your ensemble, and I think that is one of the things that informs the way I write. It's not the only thing, but it's certainly part of the picture.
Right. Okay. So think in a little bit more of a specific vein then of that question. If you were to take it on a weekly basis or on a monthly basis, how much of your life do you dedicate towards quote, air quotes, being a composer versus being a conductor teacher?
I don't know how to quantify that.
Okay.
Really. I think the idea of separating out parts of musicianship is really quite a relatively recent phenomenon. I'm not even sure whether Bach would have described himself as a composer. He was a Kapellmeister. He composed music, of course. He also performed. He trained singers. He did all of these things. He was a musician. And I think most musicians over the centuries have been participants in music in a number of different ways. We don't really think of Mozart as a conductor, do we?
Mm-mm.
We've decided that he's a composer. But, we shouldn't forget that he conducted his own operas, and, he must have been able to make that ensemble work. And wouldn't we all love to be able to sit in on one of his rehearsals? That would be fascinating. But, history has meant that we now see him as a composer, because that's the bit of his life that is left. And even, more recently, Rachmaninoff and Chopin, and, these people were pianists, and of course they wrote music, and they're composers as well. And I think we all learn different parts of our own musicianship from the elements that go into it. So I'm not sure that I can, even if I'm not physically sitting down writing a piece, if I'm conducting a choir, that's not necessarily stopping me being a composer. It may not create a publication for the next day, but it's still part of my learning process and my teaching process and all the things that go into being a musician for whom composition is a part and performance is a part. Mm-hmm. But it's all the same thing. And conducting, composing are also are always very closely related, I think. And when I'm teaching conducting, I teach it as a composer, because I want my students, I'm not just interested in whether they can learn, hand patterns and things. What I want to know is, do they understand the music from a composer's point of view? Do they understand the essence of what the music is there to do? Mm-hmm. So I'm reluctant to put a clock on any one of those.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, you are, even when standing in front of a choir, you could be developing ideas of things to try, things to not try with your next composition. So yeah, that all makes sense. For my audience, if you could, kind of on our way out, maybe tell us about a few pieces of your choral music that we should go look for, and how would we find them?
Well, I've been very fortunate.
Pick your favorite child.
I've been very fortunate that a lot of my music has been recorded. At least a lot of my choral music has been recorded. The majority of it. So luckily they don't have to go much further than Spotify. And I would ask people to take the trouble to go to recordings that have been, as it were, professionally made, rather than just things that people happen to have uploaded on YouTube, which may or may not be great performances. I think most of us take quite a lot of trouble in making recordings, and you hope that people will listen to those ones. So my most performed piece is a setting of the Diary of Anne Frank, Annelies. And that's quite a substantial work. That's a 75-minute work, really designed to be a whole concert. And that is performed a great deal. And then
where's that published?
It's published by Chester Music.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's how I first met James, because he came to Houston to enjoy a performance by Houston Chamber Choir of that particular piece, which is a marvelous work. Anyway.
Yeah, and that's recorded on Naxos by James Jordan and his choir, the Williamson Voices, Westminster Choir College. Very beautifully. Ariana Zuckerman is the solo soprano on that recording, the Lincoln Trio. So that's a very nice recording. And so that's the piece that gets most performances. And then there are some other pieces that you might, the more substantial pieces are Luminosity, which has...
also for Westminster.
That was also written for Westminster, which has a kind of Indian background to it. That it's written for. It includes a tampura, an Indian drone instrument, and a viola with sort of Carnatic writing. Also with choirs, though, and organ. There's the Son of God Mass. That I like to bring instruments in. That piece has a soprano saxophone in it as well. Which works very well. And then there's a whole host of smaller, shorter works. Things that I've written recently include the Christmas Welcome, which also has a Houston connection, because that was written for the cathedral in Houston. Mm-hmm. And then orchestrated for St. Luke's in Houston. So there you go.
You need to move.
That has that, yes. Or maybe not. And various other pieces now published by Oxford University Press, Solitude, Arise My Love, but several pieces, many pieces also published by Chester's, octavos.
Great.
Probably too many to go through one by one.
And I would imagine there's probably a jameswhitbourn.com type of is that like a website where you could somebody could find all of your pieces regardless of who's published them?
They can, yes.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, that's great. I'll make sure I put that in the show notes and people can link to that if they're interested in finding some of your music. It sounds very I'm going to use the word eclectic, but not in a derogatory way, just meaning that there, with all the different instruments that you pull in, it would maybe be kind of hard to pin you down to a certain sound. Is that fair?
I like not to be pinned down. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that would make sense. That's awesome. This was a really fun conversation, Betsy. Thank you for bringing James, and James, thank you for joining us. This was fun.
Very welcome.
Anything you guys want to add on the way out?
Thank you for talking to me. Thank you for your questions. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Betsy. We'll see you soon.
Yep. Bye.
Okay. All right. Bye. Thank you, as always, for sticking around to the end of an episode. I hope you enjoyed that conversation and found it useful. One of the things that you can always do to help me the most is help to spread the word. That is liking, sharing, sending in an email, signing up for my email list on choralosophy.com. Basically, just whatever you do to stay in touch helps me. Leaving ratings, all those types of things. The other thing, of course, a little bit more active, is to use that promo code, the Choralosophy, at checkout. At Sight Reading Factory, mymusicfolders.com, mychoirrobes.com, sheet music from Ryan Main, graphitepublishing.com. And then, of course, you can join the Patreon. Patreon.com/Choralosophy is a growing group of supporters that appreciate the time that it takes to put out this content every week, and they want to leave a tip. And of course, you can find that information in the show notes for all of that stuff and be connected in that way. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.